Hello and welcome to the NHL Best Bets. Only one game last night. Toronto played in Winnipeg. Not maybe so high quality game, but Winnipeg at least showed that they are preparing for playoffs with a little bit improvement if we compare their game a few weeks ago. Winnipeg won 4-2. So total was exactly 6 in push in that bet, but Toronto wasn't so good as Machine predicted. So a bit loss last night, but these are very difficult games to pick and bet because we don't know what kind of motivation different teams have. Both teams have now qualified for playoffs and will start those games within a few days.
Yeah, it was a game that went the other way than we expected. We were expecting Toronto to go on full offense and score a lot of goals. They did not do that. They started well, but Winnipeg showed that they are now preparing for the playoffs. They played pretty well defensively. Their top guy, Kyle Connor, scored 2 goals. He played well. The first line otherwise maybe a little bit. Still, we can expect a little bit better from them, but it was a nice win for a team that has struggled, and for Toronto, just a warm-up for the playoffs. So not a lot of big guns showing up that time. So no goals for Matthews or Marner or any of those guys. So a little bit disappointing in that regard. But like you mentioned, it's really difficult to predict these games, how are the teams approaching it. So a good win for Winnipeg, a bit bad loss for us, or at least a push and a loss, so no profits here. But I do think it was a good pick still from these selections that we made, because there's not much choice. So this time the simulations didn't know what they were doing.
Yeah, it's difficult to pick when there's only one game to pick, so you cannot select wrong too much. But if a machine is wrong, your pick is not correct either.
Yeah, it's the system that works throughout the season, so one game here or there doesn't matter.
Let's go to tonight's game. We have 2 games tonight, and one of those is first playoff game. So Boston starts playoff series in Washington. These teams have played pretty equally, like we discussed yesterday. Washington is predicted in our simulations to be favorite also in the first game at home. Surprisingly, odds are very high, plus 120 for the home team, and that's our pick for the first playoff game. Second one, Vancouver plays their remaining of the season games, this time in Edmonton. Edmonton prepares for the playoffs, their last regular season game here, and maybe the few goal threshold for their top guys, Connor McDavid and Leo Draisaitl, have something to prove, and that's one of the reasons why over 6.0 is our pick here with the good plus 106 odds.
Yeah, good value picks there. 2 games, 2 great picks there. The last game of the regular season for Edmonton Oilers, I think they will go full offense, try to enjoy their last regular season game before starting the very tough series against the Winnipeg Jets. So I think Vancouver will be in for a treat with these offensive guys who still have something to show. So Edmonton played quite defensively against Montreal. Those 2 games finished after the regulation only by 3-4 scores. So I think now is the time that they can blow off the steam a little bit and score a lot of goals. I think Vancouver might score a couple as well. It is Alex Stalock, the taxi squad goaltender, set to start for Edmonton. So also a big question mark how he's going to perform behind this defense that might not be the best of the league, especially if they're not fully into it. So a great value for that over 6.0 goals. So let's hope it goes a little bit better than last night. And then starting for the playoffs already with the regular season on, I think this has never happened before. It's amazing to see Washington Capitals starting as underdogs against Boston, no matter if there is some guys off or having had some issues with COVID, still it's a great value for a complete coin flip of a game, 50-50 game, and we get odds of plus 120. So this is a no-brainer for Washington. These teams have played really tough matchup, very close games throughout the season. So throughout the last season as well. So I do think this pair will be a very interesting one, very close matched up. But when you get 120 odds for a home team in the first game, it's a no-brainer for us.
Yeah, Washington has maybe few injuries there. It's a bit unclear if a Russian center Yevgeny Kuznetsov will play, or their goalkeeper, maybe number one goalkeeper Ilya Samsonov, but they have very good backup in Czech Videcek, and of course their offense is deep, and they have players who can match up with Boston's setup.
Yeah, I wouldn't be worried about the injuries to Kuznetsov. They've already played a lot of the season without these Russian guys, so we've seen that Capitals are deep enough to beat any team even without Kuznetsov. It might be that TJ Oshie is out as well. He had some sort of upper body injury, but of course, because it's playoffs, nobody tells anything straight up. So we'll see when the puck drops who is gonna play.
Yeah. And like we said yesterday, most probably this would be 6-game series for Washington, 4-2. So let's see how that predictions by the machine goes.
Yeah, usually the first game is something of a little bit of a feeler. So I think that even if Boston would have the upper hand, this is the home team's advantage in this season. That is very weird. So now Capitals will show up in the first game and take the reins from the start.
And then if we go to the, let's say, semifinals or Final Four or Frozen Four or whatever people are calling these last 3 games of the series. Yesterday we went through all the division and division winners. All the number 1 seeds except in Central Division are going to push to be top 4. So Pittsburgh from the east, Colorado from the west, Toronto from the north, and then Tampa Bay from the central, that is not seeded number 1. And when we take a look of these semifinals, the pairing goes so that top team from the regular season, Colorado, faces the lowest point team out of these 4, so that's Tampa Bay in this case. And like our simulations have liked Colorado throughout the season, they shouldn't give any chances for Tampa. 72% win probability of the series for Colorado, and most probable game in 4-1. Tommy, do you think Tampa as a regaining champion would have some kind of chances against the offensive machine of Avalanche?
It will be a very interesting and good matchup for both teams, actually, because Colorado's way of playing is offensive. Tampa Bay can mix it up a lot. They can play a lot of very solid defense as well. But we'll see if Tampa Bay is playing as they are capable of, like they performed last season in the playoffs, then they have a chance to beat Colorado. But so far this season, I think Tampa Bay has not played as well as they could. Of course, they have not needed to, because it doesn't matter what you do in regular season as long as you reach the playoffs. But they definitely haven't made it easy for themselves. So they have a tough matchup already in the first round. And maybe that's something that Colorado will take advantage of, maybe going a little bit easier in the first pairing. And then when they meet later, might be an easier game for Colorado. But this pair, if they meet, I think, in my papers, 2 of the biggest favorites to win the Stanley Cup. So interesting to see how this matchup goes.
So the road of Colorado's Stanley Cup victory goes through the toughest teams. Maybe not the first round, or you never know what kind of St. Louis will show up. But then there should be Vegas, that is maybe number 2, number 3 favorite, and then Tampa, that is another number 2, number 3 favorite here. So let's see how the guys in Denver can go through and proceed in this road.
Yeah, it is very usual that in the Western Conference back in the day when there were conferences, the playoff journey is quite rough and the teams are much more physical, much more aggressive, and it's a grinding sort of series. So more 7 games likelihood here and longer as well. So maybe in the eastern part it is a little bit easier. Now, of course, the central is Tampa Bay will go through Florida, likely to go through Carolina. So also good teams, but not maybe as physically tough as in the western part of the league. So that also is something that Colorado needs to take care of, that they are not too exhausted when heading to the final rounds if they are. But it's Stanley Cup playoffs, so you can't just put your you cannot let your foot off the pedal at any moment in these games. So a tough matchup, whoever they are facing.
Then second semifinal between Pittsburgh and Toronto. Pittsburgh will have home arena advantage there, but it looks like Toronto, out of these two very offensive heavy teams, will be the one that will take the final position. Looks like very coin flip of every game, 6 or 7 games, and those percentages in both games are very even. So do you think Pittsburgh can continue the surprises and maybe go through all the way to the playoffs, Stanley Cup finals, after we predicted them to be out of the playoffs before the season?
Yeah, if you take a look at what is the most improved team throughout the season, that's Pittsburgh Penguins. They were not supposed to make it to the playoffs in the East. Now they won the division. They were the best team at home in the whole of NHL. So very important to get the home ice advantage here as well. Against Toronto, it's a coin flip of a matchup. They have not faced too often in the playoffs. I can't remember them facing. And this time Toronto is taking the upper hand by 52% to 48%, but that is in a 7-game series. It means that everything can happen. So either or. Penguins do have a chance, of course, but Toronto looks like a team that now is the time for them to go all the way. Penguins need to play a little bit better defensively. Their goaltending is still a little bit of an issue. Interesting to see how they will start the series, because Islanders is not an easy matchup for them. They were very good against them in the regular season, but we've seen that Islanders have the chance to upset. Then they're probably going to face Washington Capitals, which is also a difficult matchup for Penguins. So a lot of hurdles before reaching that phase to go against Toronto, which is then the better team in the end.
Yeah, if Toronto continues to the final, they face Colorado there. So two very offensive, heavy, star caliber teams there in final. These teams have faced each other during the last 3 seasons 6 times. And funny thing is that the last 5 have been won by visitor teams. So Colorado has won 4 out of these 6, Toronto 2. So not big difference there in the past, and like I said, these teams haven't faced too many times. Now it would be great final if they are playing for the Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah, it's been a while since either of these teams have won, so it would be good to have a new winner for a long time. I think it was that 20 years or something for Colorado, and I don't even know if Toronto has won it because I was not born when that happened.
Yeah, I think Toronto won somewhere in 60s, if I have read the books. I wasn't born either, but that's some kind of pension people who can remember maybe these Toronto glory days in 60s. But Colorado, they won 20 years ago and also 25 years ago in their first season in Denver. So I think it's time for them to win again.
Yeah, they are a promising team, and out of all of these, all of the NHL teams that we've run the simulations, Colorado is by far the best against any team we have. Toronto then is the second best, so this is the reason they are in the final. So quite a big difference between the first Colorado and then the second Toronto, but the third and the rest comes in a quite an even bunch. There is Pittsburgh, Tampa Bay, Vegas, pretty close, and Carolina also in the mix. So those two teams, Toronto and Colorado, seem to be by far the best two teams in this league, and that's why they should be meeting in the Stanley Cup Finals.
When we take a look at Stanley Cup winning probabilities, these two teams are only ones with double-digit percentage, and maybe a bit surprising, or maybe not so surprising based on the simulation, is that Colorado has a 22% chance to win the Stanley Cup. That is very, very high when we think about how many teams there is, how even some of the series are, and how tough road they have to go through the Vegas and maybe some other tough teams that they are facing. We don't know yet which ones, but like we discussed, it won't be easy from the West. Which teams have some kind of value when we think about betting the Stanley Cup winner here and comparing to some of the sports books?
Yeah, compared to sportsbook, first thing to take notice is that the return percentage for the Stanley Cup winning is not very good. So there is not a lot of value, even if we would be completely disagreeing with those odds. But we do have, like you mentioned, Colorado with 22% favorites, which is a massive number. I don't remember us having ever this high for Stanley Cup champions. That would mean American odds of plus 355. And you can get 450 for that. That is 18%. So there is value for betting on Colorado according to the simulations. And the way they have played this season, I do agree with that they are the heaviest favorites for sure. Of course, there is a lot of hockey to be played, and you always need to be a bit careful when placing these bets. But this value is nice for a favorite here. Then there is only 3 teams that have value according to the simulations compared to the Stanley Cup winning odds. So Pittsburgh Penguins, like I mentioned, the most surprising team according to the simulations. So they rose from outside of the playoffs to the top of the Eastern Division, and then also to the finals against Toronto. If Toronto is valued at 11%. That was the second team that had double digits. Their odds are lousy. They are only at 13 to 15%. So no value for Toronto. We go with Pittsburgh Penguins with odds of 1,300 on offer, and that is 8% in the simulation. So there is about 1% value here, and it's enough for us because we have to make some picks here. Capitals in the same division, then about the same number, 7% according to simulations. They get the same odds. Actually, Capitals are valued at plus 1,700, while we would bet them 1,330. So there is nicer value for Washington, but I do think that Penguins have a small upper hand there, especially because of a certain fandom there. So I'll go with the Penguins rather than Capitals. And then if you go for a long shot, we do have Edmonton Oilers with some value, 6.5% to win the Stanley Cup. They are quite low in the rankings. They are facing Toronto probably, and they have not been that good. But you have to remember McDavid, Draisaitl, they can turn any game to Edmonton's favor. Also probably a playoff series. Now they are in for real, and they get good odds of plus 2,200 from the bookmakers. So there is nice value if we would play with plus 1,440. So these 4 teams are the ones that we can play. Let's have a look how the odds set up. There might be some better offerings as well.
It's interesting to see that out of these 16 teams that are now playing for the playoffs, most of them have this kind of offense-heavy setup and good scoring, star caliber first line, and they have been able to just outscore the opponents. We have Colorado, Toronto, Tampa, Carolina, many of these top teams here, and basically there is only few teams that are more based on stingy defense and grinding type of hockey. Vegas, New York Islanders, St. Louis Blues, the most prominent teams of this kind of tactics. Do you think traditionally this kind of grinding teams have performed better in playoffs, but are those days now gone, and teams with the high octane offense, like let's say Edmonton Oilers in 80s, will dominate the playoffs this season and seasons onwards?
I think there is this trend going on, of course, that you play a lot faster, you play a lot more with skill than with grit. But when it comes down to being extremely physically just exhausted, you have to have the sort of mentality, and that comes from playing very aggressive, physical, gritty game. So like we saw St. Louis Blues winning the Stanley Cup, they were not the most talented team, they were not the fastest team, but they had this certain perseverance that is needed to win the cup. So there is still room for that sort of thing. But like you mentioned, nowadays we do have these teams like Colorado, a good example, Carolina, another. Tampa Bay can play many different ways as well. So I do think that this is the trend that is ongoing, and it will show if you have a little bit faster, a little bit lighter players, you can just escape from those big guys and you can create a lot more goal scoring chances. What is all about nowadays ice hockey is who can create the more chances, and that is eventually gonna lead to enough goals to win games. So if you break it down into small statistics, that is the only thing that matters: who scores most goals from their chances, and therefore who creates more chances. So that's why Colorado, I think, is a very good example of this modern hockey team. But you have to also have some balance, and you have to make sure that the opponent doesn't get those chances.
Yeah, and Colorado has one advantage, and they have now home arena advantage throughout the playoffs against any team, and they are playing in Mile High in Denver. So if you are big and heavy defender in thin air, you may catch your breath few times during the game 7 in the decider. So I think that's one point that both ice hockey and American football have recorded, that teams in high altitude have some kind of upper hand when the visitors are coming to town for a short period of time.
Yeah, and also adding to that, if a regular season normally is very tiring, very exhausting, players are already banged up when the playoffs start. You can only imagine how it is this year when they played in almost double the speed than usual. So there is a lot of broken bodies there already. And if you are a little bit knackered and you have to go play in Colorado, the home team definitely has the advantage.
Let's see how our picks perform. We continue this best bets every day like we have done during the regular season. There is games every day, both playoffs and regular season for a while, but then mid next week or later part of the next week, it's only playoffs after Vancouver have been able to complete their regular season as well.
Yeah, soon we can forget these exhibition games and just concentrate on the playoffs.
Let's see how Washington-Boston game starts, and we'll be back tomorrow.
See you tomorrow.